A single collision. A decade of numbness shattered in seconds. When crime boss Adrian Voss crashed into caterer Nia Carter at a glittering gala, he felt something he thought was dead forever: sensation. For 9 years, he'd lived as a ghost in his own skin, moving through a world of blood and power without feeling any of it. But her touch awakened everything. Now he's hunting her. Obsessed, dangerous, desperate. She's drowning in debt, and he's offering salvation, with strings attached. Stay until the end to see how far obsession can fall into love. Drop a like and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The Bentley's engine purred to silence outside the Grandview Hotel, its sleek black body reflecting the golden lights that cascaded down the building's Art Deco facade. Adrian Voss sat in the back seat, motionless, watching the parade of wealth flow through the entrance. Jewels caught the light like trapped stars. Laughter carried on the cool October air, bright and hollow. He felt nothing. "Mr. Voss?" His driver's voice came through carefully, the way everyone spoke to him now, measured, cautious, like addressing a loaded weapon. "They're ready for you." Adrian adjusted his cufflinks, platinum and understated, worth more than most people earned in a year. The motion was automatic, muscle memory from a life that had continued long after he'd stopped living it. 9 years, 4 months, and 16 days since he'd felt anything resembling human emotion. He'd counted once, in a moment of morbid curiosity, then stopped because even that hadn't stirred anything in the wasteland of his chest. "Give me a minute," he said. The driver nodded, knowing better than to press. Everyone knew better than to press Adrian Voss. At 34, he controlled half the city's underground economy with the precision of a surgeon and the mercy of winter. His reputation wasn't built on rage or chaos. Those were tools for amateurs. No. Adrian's power came from something far more unsettling: absolute glacial control. He made decisions that ruined lives with the same emotional investment most people gave to choosing breakfast. The door opened. Cool air rushed in, carrying the scent of expensive perfume and autumn leaves. Adrian stepped out, 6 feet 2 inches of tailored perfection, dark hair swept back from a face that women called beautiful and men called dangerous. Both were correct. His gray eyes, the color of winter storms, swept the entrance with practiced efficiency, cataloging exits, security, potential threats. Always threats. Never opportunities. The gala was for some charity he'd donated $250,000 to without reading the cause. Cancer research, maybe. Or children's literacy. It didn't matter. These events were business dressed in silk and false compassion. Places where deals happened between the champagne and the auction, where power changed hands with handshakes that meant more than any contract. "Mr. Voss, so glad you could make it." Senator Morrison appeared at his elbow, too practiced to be genuine, too powerful to ignore. "Wonderful cause, isn't it? Making a real difference." Adrian shook his hand, applied exactly the right amount of pressure, produced exactly the right smile, warm enough to be polite, cool enough to prevent familiarity. Indeed, the foundation does important work. He had no idea what foundation. Morrison launched into an enthusiastic explanation that Adrian absorbed without listening, nodding at appropriate intervals while his mind calculated the real reason for this conversation. The senator wanted something. They always wanted something. Perhaps discuss it over dinner next week? I think we could find some mutually beneficial arrangements. There it was. Adrian's smile didn't waver. "Have your assistant call mine. We'll find a time." Morrison beamed, pumped his hand once more, and disappeared into the crowd to work his next mark. Adrian moved deeper into the ballroom, a shark gliding through glittering schools of prey. Conversations parted around him, reformed in his wake. People watched from the corners of their eyes, pretending not to stare at the man everyone knew and no one truly knew. The ballroom was excessive, even by the standards of the city's elite. Crystal chandeliers dripped light onto marble floors. Ice sculptures melted slowly at the center of tables laden with catered excess. A string quartet played something classical and forgettable in the corner while servers in crisp white shirts navigated the crowd with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Adrian accepted a glass from a passing waiter, held it because it gave his hands something to do, wouldn't drink it because he never drank at these things. Alcohol dulled edges he couldn't afford to lose. Besides, even if he'd wanted to get drunk, he suspected he couldn't. Liquor, like everything else, simply passed through him without effect, another substance in a world that had lost its texture. Adrian Voss at a charity gala. Hell must have frozen over. He turned to find Marcus Chen grinning at him, one of the few men in the city who could approach without fear. Marcus ran the docks, and more importantly, understood the unwritten rules of their arrangement: mutual profit, minimal interference, absolute discretion. Marcus, I could say the same about you. But I'm here for the food. Have you tried those crab things? Fucking incredible. Marcus popped another hors d'oeuvre into his mouth, chewed appreciatively. Some new catering company, Carter and Associates, I think, making waves. Adrian nodded, not particularly interested. Food was fuel, nothing more. He ate enough to function, expensive enough to maintain appearances, but taste had left him along with everything else. The best steak tasted like cardboard. Champagne might as well be water. You hear about the Kozlov situation? Marcus lowered his voice, stepped closer. Business, then. Always business. I've heard rumors. More than rumors. Dmitri's getting ambitious, pushing into territories that aren't his. Word is he's trying to consolidate the South End before making a move north. And you think he'll move on my territories? Adrian's voice remained level, mildly curious, as if they were discussing the weather. I think he's young, stupid, and doesn't remember what happened to the last person who challenged you. Marcus met his eyes. But young and stupid can still be dangerous if they're desperate enough. Adrian considered this, running calculations through the tactical part of his brain that never slept. Dmitri Kozlov was third-generation Russian mob, eager to prove himself, hungry enough to be reckless. Dangerous, yes, but manageable. Everything was manageable when you felt nothing, feared nothing, wanted nothing. I'll handle it, Adrian said. I know you will. Just wanted you to hear it from me first. Marcus clapped him on the shoulder, a gesture of camaraderie that Adrian accepted without feeling. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to find more of those crab things before they're gone. Left alone again, Adrian drifted toward the edge of the ballroom, positioning himself where he could observe without being constantly approached. This was his preferred state at these events, present enough to maintain appearances, distant enough to avoid meaningful interaction. He watched the crowd move through its choreographed patterns, predators and prey in evening wear, everyone performing their role. How much longer would he have to stay? An hour, minimum, to satisfy social obligation. Then he could return to his penthouse, to the silence and solitude that had become his only comfort. He'd review reports, check in with his lieutenants, maybe read until dawn, since sleep, like everything else, came reluctantly these days. 9 years, 4 months, and 16 days of this half-life, this existence without living. Adrian finished his circuit of the room, exchanged pleasantries with a city councilman, declined an invitation to invest in a tech startup, avoided the advances of a socialite whose husband's gambling debts made her desperate enough to try. The evening unfolded exactly as expected, perfectly predictable, completely hollow. He was checking his watch, 40 minutes, close enough, when it happened. The impact came from his left, sudden and total. One moment he was standing still, the next he was colliding with something, someone, a force that shouldn't have been strong enough to move him, but somehow did. His champagne glass flew from his hand, sailed through the air in slow motion, and shattered against the marble floor with a sound like a gunshot. The ballroom went silent. Adrian stumbled, catching himself against a nearby column, and then, before his mind could process what had happened, before he could react, before he could retreat behind the walls that had protected him for nearly a decade, he felt it. Pain blazed across his chest where the collision had occurred, sharp and bright and real, the cold of the champagne soaking through his shirt, shocking against his skin. The heat of embarrassment flushing up his neck, the pounding of his heart suddenly thunderous, suddenly present in a way it hadn't been since... Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't. The tray, someone grabbed my arm, and... The voice cut through his shock like a knife. Female, young, horrified. Adrian looked down and saw her, a woman in her mid-20s, drowning in a white catering uniform 2 sizes too large, surrounded by the wreckage of what had once been a tray of appetizers. Bacon-wrapped scallops and stuffed mushrooms decorated the floor in a wide radius. Her dark hair had escaped its bun, wild curls framing a face frozen in absolute horror. Her eyes met his, deep brown and wide with panic, and Adrian felt the world tilt. Another wave of sensation crashed through him, dizziness, adrenaline, something else he couldn't name. His fingers tingled, his skin felt too tight. The ballroom was too loud, too bright, too much after years of muted gray. "I'm so sorry," she repeated, dropping to her knees, trying to gather the scattered food with shaking hands. "I didn't mean... This is my first event, and I'll clean this up. Don't." The word came out harsher than he intended, rough with shock. Adrian cleared his throat, tried again. "Don't. Just stand up. Look at me. Let me see if this is real." But the words wouldn't come because his heart was racing now, actually racing, and he could feel the expensive fabric of his shirt clinging to his chest, and the eyes of 300 guests boring into him, and the heat of the woman's proximity like standing too close to a fire. She looked up at him, still kneeling in the wreckage, and something passed between them. Recognition, maybe, though they'd never met. Or perhaps just the shared acknowledgement of a moment gone catastrophically wrong. "I'm so sorry," she whispered one more time. Then security was there pulling her up, pulling her away. The event coordinator swooped in with apologies dripping from her lips like honey, offering napkins and a fresh shirt and assurances that the caterer would be dealt with. The crowd began to murmur, conversations resuming, the moment already becoming gossip, an anecdote for tomorrow's brunch. But Adrian couldn't move. He stood frozen, one hand pressed against his chest, where the impact had occurred, feeling his heart thunder against his ribs. Feeling. The word echoed in his mind like a prayer, like a curse. After 9 years of nothing, of emptiness, of moving through the world like a ghost. This. "Mr. Voss." The coordinator touched his arm, and he actually flinched, at the contact. "Are you all right? Should I call a doctor?" "No." His voice sounded strange to his own ears. "I'm fine. Just give me a moment." He pulled away, walked on unsteady legs toward the terrace doors, needing air, needing space, needing to understand what the hell had just happened. The October night hit him like a wall, cold enough to sting, real enough to confirm he wasn't hallucinating. Adrian gripped the terrace railing, his knuckles white against the stone. Below, the city spread out in a carpet of lights, beautiful and indifferent. He'd looked at this view from 100 terraces at 100 events and felt nothing. Now it made his chest ache with something he couldn't name. He could still feel where she'd hit him. The phantom warmth of the impact, the shock of the collision. More than that, he could remember her face. Not the cool photographic memory he usually employed, but something visceral and immediate. The exact shade of brown in her eyes. The way her hair had escaped its confinement. The tremor in her hands as she'd tried to clean up her mess. 9 years, 4 months, and 16 days of nothing. And now, impossibly, overwhelmingly, everything. Adrian didn't sleep that night. He returned to his penthouse at midnight, ignored the reports waiting on his desk, poured himself 3 fingers of scotch he wouldn't drink, and stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows watching the city pulse below. His chest still felt strange, tight, like something had cracked open that was meant to stay sealed. He'd stripped off the champagne-soaked shirt hours ago, examined himself in the mirror like a stranger, half expecting to find visible evidence of whatever had happened. But his skin was unmarked, his body the same machine it had always been. Except it wasn't. Not anymore. He could feel the cold glass in his hand, could taste the scotch when he finally, experimentally, took a sip. Oak and smoke and complexity he'd forgotten existed. Could hear the distant wail of sirens with a clarity that made him wince. It should have been miraculous. Instead, it was terrifying. Because Adrian Voss had built an empire on being untouchable, unbreakable, unflinching. He'd made decisions that required the absence of conscience, executed strategies that demanded emotional distance. His power came from being the man who couldn't be threatened, who couldn't be leveraged, who had nothing left to lose. If that was gone, if he could feel again, what did that make him? Weak, vulnerable, human. He drained the scotch, felt it burn down his throat, and immediately poured another. The alcohol was hitting him now, loosening the tight control he'd maintained since the moment in the ballroom. His reflection in the window looked haggard, eyes too bright, jaw too tight. "What the hell are you doing to me?" he whispered to the empty room, but he knew who the question was really for. The young woman with the frightened eyes and the fallen appetizers and the catastrophic timing. The woman who'd crashed into him and somehow, impossibly, woken something he'd thought was dead. He needed to know her name. The thought came unbidden, but absolute, settling into his mind with the weight of necessity. Her name. Where she worked. Who she was. The need surprised him with its intensity, this sudden hunger for information that had nothing to do with business or strategy. Adrian pulled out his phone, made a call. It was answered before the first ring finished. "Sir?" "The catering company from tonight's event. Carter and Associates. I need everything on them by morning. Owners, employees, financials, history, everything." A pause. "May I ask why, sir?" "No." Adrian ended the call. He told himself it was simply curiosity, a puzzle to solve, a mystery to unravel. He'd built his reputation on knowing everything about everyone who entered his orbit, on having information before anyone else. This was no different, except it was, and he knew it. He wanted to see her again, wanted to understand what had happened, needed to know if it would happen again, if her touch would bring back that overwhelming rush of sensation that both terrified and exhilarated him. 9 years of nothing, broken by a woman who'd spilled champagne on his shirt. Adrian laughed, the sound bitter and strange in the quiet penthouse. If his enemies knew, if they understood that his legendary control had been shattered by a catering accident, they'd move on him within hours. Blood would run in the streets. His empire would crack. He couldn't let that happen. Which meant he had two choices. Bury this, kill whatever had awakened before it could destroy him, retreat back into the safe numbness of the last 9 years. Or find her. Adrian stared at his reflection, at the stranger looking back at him with wild eyes and color in his cheeks for the first time in a decade. "I'm going to find you," he said to the ghost of the woman in the window. "And then we're going to figure out what the hell you did to me." The decision was made. Reckless, potentially catastrophic, completely unlike him. And for the first time in 9 years, 4 months, and 16 days, Adrian Voss felt something close to anticipation. Much sense. Nia Carter was going to lose everything. She sat in her tiny studio apartment, surrounded by bills spread across her secondhand coffee table like evidence at a crime scene. Rent, 3 months overdue. Student loans, default notices, credit cards, maxed and multiplying. The catering business she'd poured her life savings into, hemorrhaging money with every event. And now this. She stared at the termination email on her phone, reading it for the 5th time, hoping the words would change. They didn't. Due to the incident at the Grandview Hotel event, Carter and Associates' contract with Premier Events has been terminated effective immediately. Your final payment, minus damages, will be processed within 30 days. Minus damages. That meant nothing. Less than nothing. She'd be lucky if they didn't sue. Nia dropped her phone onto the couch, pressed her palms against her eyes until she saw stars. 26 years old, 3 years out of culinary school, and she was about to be homeless. The business she'd built from scratch with her best friend Jasmine, the dream they'd sacrificed for, was dead. Killed by one moment of catastrophic clumsiness and the worst luck in the world. Of all the people to crash into, of all the men in that ballroom to accidentally drench in champagne and humiliation, Adrian Voss. Nia had known the moment she'd looked up from the wreckage, known from the shocked silence that spread through the room, from the way her supervisor's face had drained of color, from the cold fury in the eyes of the man standing above her. She'd seen him earlier in the evening, impossible to miss even in a crowd of the wealthy and powerful. He'd moved through the ballroom like a predator, all controlled grace and casual menace. The other servers had whispered warnings. Don't approach unless he signals. Don't make eye contact. Don't, under any circumstances, fuck up around Adrian Voss. And what had she done? "I'm such an idiot," she muttered, dropping her hands. Such a complete idiot. Her phone buzzed. Jasmine. The 3rd call in an hour. Nia let it go to voicemail again, unable to face her best friend's concern, or worse, her pity. Jasmine had warned her that taking the Premier Events contract was risky, that they weren't ready for events at that scale. But Nia had been desperate, had seen it as their big break, their chance to break into the high-end market. Instead, it had broken them. The apartment was too quiet, too small, too full of evidence of her failing life. Textbooks from culinary school she'd never be able to pay off, equipment for a catering business that no longer existed, dreams turning to ash in real time. Nia stood, needing to move, needing to do something. She walked to the kitchen, barely more than a galley, with delusions of grandeur, and did what she always did when the world got too heavy. She cooked. There wasn't much in the fridge. Eggs, some wilting spinach, half an onion, a sad-looking tomato. She grabbed them all, let her hands take over, let the familiar motions quiet the screaming in her head. Knife through onion, precise and clean. Oil shimmering in the pan, the sizzle of aromatics hitting heat. This was her language, the only one she'd ever truly been fluent in. While other kids had been out partying, she'd been in her grandmother's kitchen learning to make roux, to taste and adjust, to understand that cooking was equal parts science and soul. Food had been her escape from a childhood marked by her parents' messy divorce, her refuge during her mother's subsequent string of terrible relationships. She'd put herself through culinary school working 3 jobs, had graduated top of her class, had turned down positions at established restaurants to build something of her own. Because she'd wanted more than just executing someone else's vision. She'd wanted to create, to own something, to prove that a girl from the bad side of town with nothing but talent and determination could make it. How's that working out? The bitter thought came as she plated the simple omelet, perfectly golden, filled with sautéed vegetables that managed to look elegant despite their humble origins. Her phone buzzed again. Not Jasmine this time. Unknown number. Nia stared at it, dread pooling in her stomach. Debt collector, probably. Or maybe Premier Events with another piece of bad news. She almost let it ring through, then answered at the last second, unable to ignore the ingrained politeness her grandmother had drilled into her. Hello? Ms. Carter? Nia Carter? Male voice, professional, unfamiliar. Yes? Who is this? My name is James Reeves. I'm calling on behalf of a client who would like to discuss a business opportunity with you. Business opportunity? Right, probably a scam. I'm not interested in... My client was very impressed with your work at last night's event. He'd like to offer you a private contract. Nia froze, fork halfway to her mouth. I'm sorry, what? A private catering contract. Dinner twice a week, prepared in his home kitchen. He's willing to pay $50,000 for a 3-month trial period. The fork clattered against the plate. $50,000. That was more than she'd made in the entire first year of her business. That was enough to cover her debts, to save the company, to... Who's your client? She asked, already knowing somehow what the answer would be. He prefers to discuss the details in person. Are you available to meet tomorrow at 2 p.m.? I can send a car. Every instinct she had screamed warning. This was too good to be true. This was dangerous. This was... Yes, she heard herself say. I'm available. Excellent. I'll send you the address. And Ms. Carter? The voice softened slightly. My client doesn't make offers lightly. I'd suggest you don't refuse this one. The call ended. Nia sat in her tiny kitchen, omelet going cold, staring at nothing. Her phone buzzed again. An address in the most expensive part of the city, the kind of neighborhood she'd only seen in magazines. She should say no, should run as far and as fast as possible from whatever this was. But when she looked around her apartment, at the bills and the broken dreams and the crushing weight of failure pressing down on her shoulders, what choice did she really have? The car that arrived the next day wasn't just expensive, it was obscene. A black Mercedes S-Class that looked like it cost more than Nia would earn in 5 years, even if her business survived. The driver was professionally courteous, opening the door without comment on her cheap dress or visible nervousness. Nia climbed in, feeling like an imposter, and watched her neighborhood disappear in the rearview mirror. The drive took 20 minutes, each one carrying her further from anything familiar. The buildings got taller, the streets got cleaner, the people walking past looked like they'd never worried about money a day in their lives. By the time the car pulled up to a gleaming high-rise that seemed to scrape the sky itself, Nia's heart was hammering against her ribs. Penthouse level, the driver said, handing her a keycard. Mr. Reeves will meet you in the private elevator. Mr. Reeves turned out to be exactly what she expected. mid-50s, impeccably dressed, with the kind of face that gave nothing away. He greeted her in the marble lobby with a handshake that was firm but brief. "Miss Carter, thank you for coming. This way, please." The private elevator was all mirrors and soft lighting, rising so smoothly Nia barely felt the motion. Reeves stood beside her, silent, apparently comfortable with the tension filling the small space. Nia watched the floor numbers climb, 20, 30, 40, 45, and tried to control her breathing. "May I ask what this is really about?" she finally said. $50,000 to cook dinner twice a week seems excessive?" Reeves smiled slightly. "My client values privacy and quality. He's willing to pay for both." "And your client is—" The elevator dinged. The doors opened directly into a penthouse apartment that stole the breath from Nia's lungs. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the entire city, offering a view that seemed impossible, like standing on top of the world. The space was enormous. Living room, dining area, kitchen visible in one sweeping glance, and decorated with the kind of minimalist elegance that only massive wealth could achieve. Everything was gray and white and chrome, beautiful and cold. And standing at the windows, backlit by the afternoon sun, was Adrian Voss. Nia stopped breathing. He turned as they entered, and the resemblance to the man from the Gala was both perfect and completely wrong. Same tall frame, same sharp features, same gray eyes. But where that man had been composed and distant, this one looked hungry. "Miss Carter." His voice was different too, rougher, more raw. "Thank you for coming." She should run. Every survival instinct she possessed was screaming at her to turn around, get back in that elevator, flee. But her feet stayed planted on the expensive hardwood, her eyes locked on his, unable to look away. "Mr. Voss," she managed, "I don't understand what—" "Let me be very clear about what this is." He moved toward her, not threatening, but inexorable, closing the distance with measured steps. "This is not about your catering skills, though I'm told they're exceptional. This is not about charity or kindness or making amends for what happened at the Gala." He stopped 3 feet away, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact, close enough that she could see the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his jaw. "This is about the fact that when you touched me, I felt something I haven't felt in 9 years, and I need to understand why." Nia's mouth went dry. That doesn't make any sense." "I know." Something almost like desperation flickered across his face. "Believe me, I know how insane this sounds, but I'm offering you $50,000 to cook for me twice a week for 3 months, because I need to figure out if that feeling was real or if I'm losing my mind." "What feeling?" she whispered. Adrian Voss, crime lord and legend, looked at her with eyes that held too much emotion for his reputation. "Everything," he said simply. "I felt everything." The silence stretched between them, heavy with impossibility. Nia's mind raced, trying to process, trying to understand. This man, this dangerous, powerful, terrifying man, was offering her a fortune because of an accident? "And if I say no," she asked, "then you walk away. I won't stop you, won't contact you again." His jaw tightened. "But your business is dead, Ms. Carter. Your debts are crushing you. I know because I had someone look into your finances. In 3 months, you'll lose your apartment, possibly declare bankruptcy." Anger flared, hot and bright. "You investigated me?" "I investigate everyone who enters my orbit. It's how I stay alive." No apology in his voice, just fact. "I'm offering you a way out. $50,000, plus I'll clear your existing debts. You cook for me twice a week, we figure out what happened between us, and you walk away with enough money to start over." "This is insane." "Yes." He stepped closer and she felt it, that strange electric charge in the air, the same one from the Gala. "But you're going to say yes anyway, because you're desperate, and I'm offering you salvation. The only question is whether you can admit that to yourself." Nia hated that he was right. Hated that she was already calculating how far that money would go, how many problems it would solve. Hated that part of her was curious, wanted to understand this strange connection he was describing. "What exactly would I have to do?" Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Adrian's shoulders relaxed slightly, the first sign that he'd been tense. "Cook dinner, Tuesday and Friday evenings, here in this kitchen. Whatever you want to make." We'll eat together, talk, and I'll see if being near you, if your touch, if any of this recreates what I felt at the gala. And if it does, then we figure out what comes next. He held her gaze. I'm not going to hurt you, Nia. That's not what this is about. It was the first time he'd used her first name, and hearing it in his voice sent a shiver down her spine. This was crazy. Reckless. Potentially the worst decision of her life. But looking around at the penthouse, at the kitchen visible beyond, a chef's dream with commercial-grade appliances and more counter space than her entire apartment, she felt something stir that wasn't quite hope, but close enough. I need to think about it, she said. You have until Monday. Adrian pulled a card from his pocket, held it out. My number. Call me with your decision. Nia took the card, their fingers brushing for just a second. She felt it, a spark, a warmth, something that made her breath catch. From the way his eyes widened slightly, he felt it too. I should go, she said quickly, stepping back. Reeves will take you home. Adrian turned back to the windows, giving her his back, and somehow that felt like a dismissal and a confession all at once. Think carefully, Nia. This could change everything. She left without another word, rode the elevator down in silence, climbed back into the expensive car with her mind spinning. The city passed in a blur as Reeves drove her home, and the entire time she felt the weight of Adrian Voss's card burning in her pocket like a promise, or a threat. When she finally made it back to her apartment, Jasmine was waiting on the steps. Where the hell have you been? Her best friend jumped up, concern and anger warring on her face. You've been dodging my calls, the business is imploding, and I find out from Instagram that you got fired from Premier Events? What is going on? Nia looked at Jasmine, her partner in every sense of the word, the person who'd believed in her when no one else did, and felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her shoulders. Tell her the truth? That Adrian Voss had offered her a fortune to cook dinner twice a week because he thought she'd somehow woken something in him? That she was actually considering taking a deal from one of the most dangerous men in the city? I might have a solution, she said instead, but you're going to think I'm crazy. Jasmine crossed her arms. Try me. So Nia told her about the car and the penthouse and the offer and the strange electric moment when their hands had touched. Told her about the $50,000 and the debt forgiveness and the impossible choice. When she finished, Jasmine stared at her for a long moment. You're right, she finally said. That is crazy. I know. He's dangerous, Nia. Like actually dangerous. People whisper about Adrian Voss like he's the boogeyman. I know. And you're seriously considering this? Nia pulled out the card, stared at the embossed number. What choice do I have? Jasmine sat down heavily on the steps, scrubbed her hands over her face. There's always a choice. Is there? Nia sat beside her. We're drowning, Jazz. The business is dead, I'm about to lose my apartment, and we both know the loans won't wait forever. This could save everything. Or get you killed. He said he won't hurt me. And you believe him? Did she? Nia thought about the look in Adrian Voss's eyes, the desperate honesty when he'd said he needed to understand what she'd done to him. He'd seemed more confused than threatening, more lost than dangerous. I think I do, she said quietly. Jasmine was silent for a long time. Finally, she sighed. If you do this, and I'm not saying you should, but if you do, we set up safety measures. You check in with me before and after every dinner. You don't tell him where you live. And the second anything feels wrong, you walk away. Deal? Deal. And Nia? Jasmine met her eyes. Be careful. Men like Adrian Voss don't do anything without a reason. Whatever he's really after, it's not just about dinner. Nia knew her friend was right, knew that accepting this offer meant stepping into a world she didn't understand, with rules she couldn't predict. But when she thought about the bills on her coffee table, the termination email, the slow collapse of everything she'd worked for, what choice did she really have? That night, unable to sleep, Nia pulled out Adrian Voss's card, stared at the number, tried to imagine what would happen if she called, if she said yes, if she stepped through this door into whatever waited on the other side. In the end, it wasn't the money that made her decision, though that was part of it. It was the memory of that moment in the elevator, when their hands had touched and something had sparked between them. The look in his eyes when he'd said everything. Whatever this was, it was real. Strange and impossible and probably dangerous, but real. And Nia Carter had never been able to walk away from a mystery. She picked up her phone, typed out a message before she could change her mind. "I'll do it. When do I start?" The response came 30 seconds later. "Tuesday, 6 p.m. I'll send a car." Nia stared at the message, at this simple confirmation that had just changed the trajectory of her life. Terror and anticipation warred in her chest, neither winning. She'd made her choice. Now she just had to survive it. End Part 1. Tuesday arrived like a storm on the horizon, inevitable and terrifying. Nia spent the intervening days researching Adrian Voss with an obsession that bordered on unhealthy, searching for information that might prepare her for what she'd agreed to. What she found wasn't reassuring. Adrian Voss appeared in news articles going back 15 years, always in the background of photos, always at the periphery of stories about business deals and political connections. Nothing concrete, nothing damning, but the pattern was clear to anyone paying attention. He owned legitimate businesses, restaurants, real estate, shipping companies. But the whispers suggested his real empire existed in the shadows. The last personal photo she could find was from 9 years ago. Adrian at some charity event, a beautiful blonde woman on his arm, both of them smiling for the camera. After that, nothing. He appeared alone in every subsequent photo, if he appeared at all, and the warmth had drained from his expression like someone had flipped a switch. 9 years. The same time frame he'd mentioned when he said he hadn't felt anything. Nia stared at the photo, at the man who looked so different from the one she'd met in the penthouse, and wondered what had happened to steal the light from his eyes. By Tuesday afternoon, her nerves were so frayed she could barely think straight. She changed clothes 4 times before settling on simple black pants and a fitted white blouse. Professional, but not formal. Unremarkable, but clean. She'd pulled her hair into a neat bun, applied minimal makeup, and stared at herself in the mirror trying to recognize the woman staring back. "You look terrified," she told her reflection. Her reflection agreed. The car arrived exactly at 5:30. Same driver, same expensive vehicle, same silent efficiency. Nia climbed in with a bag containing her knives, the good ones, the set her grandmother had given her when she graduated culinary school, and tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. The drive felt both too long and too short. By the time the car pulled up to Adrian's building, Nia's heart was attempting to beat its way out of her chest. The driver handed her the key card without comment, and she rode the elevator up alone, watching the floor numbers climb like a countdown to something inevitable. The doors opened. The penthouse stretched before her exactly as she remembered, beautiful and cold and impossibly vast. But this time she wasn't focused on the view. Adrian stood in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, looking uncomfortable and out of place in his own home. When he saw her, something crossed his face. Relief, maybe, or vindication. And Nia realized with a start that he'd been worried she wouldn't come. "You're here," he said, and the rawness in his voice made her chest tight. "I said I would be." Nia stepped off the elevator, forced herself to walk forward despite every instinct screaming at her to retreat. Where do you want me to start?" Adrian gestured to the kitchen. "Everything you need should be there. If something's missing, tell me, and I'll have it delivered." He paused, seeming uncertain in a way that didn't fit his reputation. "I wasn't sure what you'd want to cook, so I had them stock everything." He wasn't exaggerating. Nia set her bag down and opened the massive refrigerator to find it crammed with ingredients: fresh vegetables, premium cuts of meat, exotic spices, imported cheeses. The pantry was equally overwhelming, shelves lined with oils and vinegars and grains she'd only dreamed of using. "This is..." She turned back to him, overwhelmed. "This is too much." "Is it?" Adrian moved closer, stopped just outside the kitchen boundary like he wasn't sure he was allowed in his own space. "I told you, I want you to cook whatever you want. No limitations." Nia pulled out her knives, set them on the pristine marble counter to give her hands something to do. "What do you like to eat?" "I don't know anymore." The confession came quietly. "Everything tastes the same. Like nothing." She looked up sharply. "Everything? You're telling me you can't taste food?" "Not for 9 years." Adrian leaned against the counter, arms crossed, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked almost vulnerable. "Not until the gala." When you crashed into me, I tasted the champagne. Actually tasted it, and then it was gone again. The implications of that hit Nia like a physical blow. That's not normal. Have you seen a doctor? Dozens, neurologists, psychiatrists, specialists of every kind. His laugh was bitter. They can't find anything wrong. No physical damage, no chemical imbalance, nothing that explains it. The best theory anyone had was trauma response, the mind protecting itself from feeling by shutting everything down. What kind of trauma? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Adrian's expression closed off, shutters slamming down behind his eyes. That's not part of our arrangement. Right, sorry. Nia turned back to the ingredients, her mind racing. Cook for a man who couldn't taste anything, somehow make him feel again through food. No pressure. What happened at the gala? When I touched you? Did you taste things after that? For about an hour. Then it faded. He watched her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. But I need to know if it was real, if it can happen again. That's why you're here. Nia pulled vegetables from the refrigerator, her hands moving on autopilot while her mind processed. This was insane. She wasn't a doctor, wasn't a therapist, wasn't equipped to deal with whatever psychological damage had stolen this man's ability to feel. But she'd taken his money, accepted his deal, and now she had to deliver something. Okay, she said, laying out tomatoes, garlic, fresh basil. I'm going to make you pasta. Simple, classic, the kind of thing that should taste like something, if anything does. And if it doesn't work, then we try again on Friday. She met his eyes, saw the desperation lurking there. That's the deal, right? 3 months. We have time. Adrian nodded, but didn't move, didn't look away. Nia turned to the stove, trying to ignore his presence, trying to focus on what she knew. Food was her language, her art, her comfort. If she could make anyone feel something through cooking, it would be through the simple perfection of execution. She started with the sauce, olive oil heating in a pan, garlic slicing paper thin, tomatoes blistering under the broiler before she peeled and crushed them. The kitchen filled with scent, rich and warm, and she fell into the rhythm that had always grounded her. This was where she belonged, where everything made sense. Can I help? Adrian's voice startled her. He'd moved closer, was standing just behind her shoulder, close enough that she could feel his warmth. You want to help cook? She couldn't keep the surprise from her voice. I want to understand what you do. How you do it. He gestured at the ingredients. Show me. It was the last thing she'd expected, but Nia found herself nodding. Okay. Here. She handed him a knife and a handful of basil. Chiffonade these, roll the leaves tight, and slice them thin. Adrian took the knife, his hands surprisingly competent despite the unfamiliarity of the task. They worked in silence for a few minutes, the only sounds the sizzle of garlic and the rhythmic thunk of his knife on the cutting board. You're good at this, Nia said, watching him work. Have you cooked before? Not in 9 years. His hands stilled for a moment. Before, I used to cook sometimes. Enjoyed it. After, it seemed pointless when I couldn't taste anything. Cooking isn't just about taste, Nia said quietly. It's about process, about creating something, about the ritual of it. Is that why you do it? The question was more personal than she'd expected. Nia added the tomatoes to the pan, stirred, bought herself time to think. I cook because it's the only thing I've ever been good at. Because food is honest. You can't fake quality, can't pretend something tastes good when it doesn't. It's pure in a way nothing else is. That's why you started your own business? Instead of working for someone else? I started my business because I was tired of executing other people's visions, tired of being told what to make, how to make it, when to make it. She tasted the sauce, adjusted the salt. I wanted to create something that was mine. And how's that working out? No cruelty in the question, just curiosity. Nia laughed, the sound sharp. You've seen my finances. You know exactly how it's working out. A failure isn't permanent unless you let it be. Adrian set down the knife, the basil perfectly chiffonade despite his claim of being out of practice. You have talent. The premier events coordinator told me your food was exceptional, that the accident was the only reason they terminated your contract. That's generous of them, considering I ruined their most important event of the year. You ruined nothing. The evening continued without incident. He He moved closer, close enough that Nia had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. The only thing you disrupted was me. The air between them felt charged again, that same electric current she'd felt in the elevator. Nia's breath caught, her pulse hammering in her throat. This close, she could see the flecks of blue in his gray eyes, could count the faint lines at their corners. The pasta, she managed, breaking eye contact, stepping back. The water's boiling. She fled to the stove, dumped fresh pasta into roiling water, focused on timing and texture and anything other than the way her skin was buzzing where his proximity had almost touched her. This was a job, she reminded herself. A transaction, nothing more. But when she plated the pasta 15 minutes later, golden strands coated in vibrant red sauce, garnished with his perfectly cut basil and shaved parmesan, and set it in front of him at the dining table, she couldn't help but hold her breath. Adrian stared at the plate like it was a puzzle he couldn't solve. Nia watched his throat work as he swallowed, saw his hand shake slightly as he picked up the fork. "What if it doesn't work?" he asked quietly. "Then we try again." She sat down across from him, her own plate untouched. "But you won't know until you taste it." He nodded, lifted the fork to his mouth, closed his eyes. Nia watched his expression, searching for any sign of reaction. For a long moment, there was nothing. Just Adrian chewing mechanically, his face carefully blank. Then something shifted. His eyes opened, wide and startled, and he took another bite, and another. His hand trembled as he set down the fork, and when he looked at her, there were tears sliding down his cheeks. "I can taste it," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I can actually taste it." The emotion in his voice made Nia's own eyes burn. She watched this dangerous man cry over pasta, watched him take bite after bite like a starving person, watched him experience something she'd taken for granted her entire life. "Tell me what you taste," she said softly. "Everything." Adrian laughed, the sound wet and overwhelmed. The sweetness of the tomatoes, the bite of the garlic, the earthiness of the basil. I don't have words. It's like being deaf your whole life and suddenly hearing music. He finished the entire plate, then looked at her with an expression so raw it hurt to witness. "How did you do this?" "I just cooked." Nia's throat was tight. "I don't understand it any more than you do. But it worked. It actually worked." Adrian stood abruptly, paced to the windows, ran his hands through his hair. "You have no idea what this means. 9 years of nothing, and now—" He turned back to her, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath stop. "I need you to touch me," he said. Nia's heart stuttered. "What?" "At the gala, when you touched me, everything came back. The taste was part of it, but there was more. Pain, heat, sensation. I need to know if that works too." He crossed back to her, stopped just within reach. "Please." Every rational thought in Nia's head screamed that this was a bad idea. But she found herself standing, found her hand reaching out, found her fingers making contact with his forearm where his sleeve was rolled back. The reaction was immediate and electric. Adrian's eyes widened, his breath catching sharply. Nia felt it too, a current running between them, warm and alive and completely inexplicable. "I can feel it," Adrian said, wonder in his voice. He covered her hand with his, pressing her palm flat against his skin. "Your warmth, the texture of your skin, the pressure. I can feel all of it." His skin was warm under her touch, slightly rough with the faint scar tissue she could see running up his forearm. The contact sent sparks shooting up her arm, made her hyper-aware of every point where their skin connected. "This is—" Nia tried to pull back, but Adrian's hand tightened over hers. "Don't! Please, just give me a minute." So she stood there, hand trapped under his, feeling her heart race and her breath shorten and wondering what the hell she'd gotten herself into. This wasn't normal. This wasn't possible. Physical contact couldn't just restore someone's ability to feel. Except apparently it could, because Adrian's eyes were closed and his expression was one of such profound relief that it made her chest ache. "Why?" she whispered. "Why me? What's so special about me that this happens?" "I don't know." Adrian opened his eyes, met her gaze. "But I'm going to find out." He released her hand, stepped back, and the loss of contact felt like being dunked in cold water. Nia wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold, suddenly aware of how far out of her depth she was. "I should go," she said. "It's barely 7. We haven't even talked." "I'm not sure what there is to talk about." Nia moved toward the elevator, needing distance, needing to think. "You can taste food when I cook it. You can feel when I touch you. That's what you wanted to know, right?" "That's not all I want to know." Adrian followed her, not touching, but close. "I want to understand why. I want to know what makes you different. I want—" "What? What do you want, Adrian?" She spun to face him, frustration and fear, and something else she couldn't name boiling over. "Because this isn't normal. This isn't how the world works. And I'm just supposed to show up twice a week and be your emotional support system or whatever this is? I'm paying you $50,000 to do exactly that, yes." His voice went cold, controlled, the crime boss sliding back into place like armor. "That was our arrangement. The arrangement was for cooking, not for whatever this is." She gestured between them. "I'm not a therapist. I'm not a miracle worker. I'm just a failed caterer who needed money." "You're more than that." Adrian's control cracked, heat bleeding through. "You're the only person in 9 years who's made me feel human. Do you understand what that means? Do you have any idea what it's like to be dead inside, to go through every day knowing you're never going to feel anything again, and then suddenly—" He stopped, jaw clenched, clearly fighting for composure. Nia softened despite herself. "I can't imagine what that's been like for you, but I'm scared, Adrian. I'm scared of what this means, scared of getting pulled into your world, scared of me?" "Yes," she admitted. "Of you, of what you do, who you are. I've heard the stories." "And which stories are those?" His voice was carefully neutral. "That you're dangerous, that people who cross you disappear, that you've built an empire on things I don't want to know about." Nia met his eyes. "Are they true?" Adrian was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was honest in a way that was somehow more frightening than any lie. "Yes, I've done things you wouldn't approve of. Hurt people who deserved it and some who probably didn't. Built my empire on blood and fear and calculated violence." He stepped closer, and Nia's back hit the elevator door. "But I meant what I said. I won't hurt you. Whatever else I am, whatever I've done, you're safe with me." "How can you promise that when you barely know me?" "Because you're the first thing I've cared about in 9 years. The confession came raw and unguarded, and I protect what I care about." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Nia's heart hammered against her ribs, torn between the urge to run and the inexplicable pull toward this broken, dangerous man who looked at her like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking for nearly a decade. "I need to go," she said again, softer this time. Adrian nodded, stepped back, gave her space. "Friday, same time?" "I don't know." "Nia." He waited until she met his eyes. "Please, I need this. I need you." The vulnerability in those words shouldn't have worked on her. She should have been smart, cautious, should have walked away from this insanity before it consumed her. But instead, she found herself nodding. "Friday, but we need to set some boundaries. Anything you want. No touching unless I initiate it. No personal questions about my life outside of this. And if I decide this is too much, I walk away. No arguments, no threats, no consequences." Adrian's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Agreed." Nia pressed the elevator button, watched the doors slide open. She stepped inside, turned to face him one last time. "What happened 9 years ago?" she asked. "What made you stop feeling?" Adrian's expression shuddered completely, walls slamming back into place. "That's not part of our arrangement." The elevator doors closed on his distant face, and Nia rode down alone, her mind spinning and her skin still tingling where they'd touched. She'd made it 3 blocks from Adrian's building before she had to stop, lean against a brick wall, and try to process what had just happened. He'd cried over her pasta. He'd held her hand like it was a lifeline. He'd looked at her like she was salvation, and she'd promised to come back. "You're an idiot," she told herself, "a complete certified idiot." But when she got home and Jasmine demanded a full report, when she tried to explain the evening and the strangeness of it, and the way Adrian had tasted food for the first time in 9 years, she couldn't quite regret her decision. He's obsessed with you, Jasmine said flatly. You get that, right? This isn't normal interest. This is fixation. I know. And you're going back. I said I would. Jasmine stared at her for a long moment. You like him. I don't even know him. That's not an answer. Jasmine crossed her arms. Nia, this man is dangerous. Whatever's happening between you two, it's not going to end well. Maybe not. Nia thought about the tears on Adrian's face, the wonder in his voice when he'd tasted her sauce. But for the first time in months, I feel like I'm doing something that matters. Like my cooking actually means something beyond just feeding people. Your cooking always mattered. Did it? Our business was failing. Premier events dropped us. I couldn't pay my rent. She met her friend's eyes. At least this way I'm making a difference, even if I don't understand how or why. Jasmine sighed, pulled her into a hug. Just be careful. Men like Adrian Voss don't let go of things they want, and he clearly wants you. Nia hugged her back, holding on to her best friend like an anchor. I'll be careful, I promise. But as she lay in bed that night, unable to sleep, she couldn't stop thinking about the way Adrian's hand had felt over hers. The warmth of his skin, the desperation in his touch, the raw emotion in his eyes. He'd said she was the only thing he'd cared about in 9 years. And terrifying as that was, part of her wanted to know what it would feel like to be cared about by a man like Adrian Voss, even if it destroyed them both. The rest of the week crawled by with agonizing slowness. Nia threw herself into research, trying to find any medical or scientific explanation for what was happening with Adrian. She read about psychosomatic disorders, trauma responses, conversion disorders, and a dozen other conditions that seemed close but not quite right. Nothing explained why physical contact with one specific person would restore sensation. Nothing made sense. By Friday, she'd given up on finding rational explanations and decided to just focus on what she could control, the food. She arrived at the penthouse with a plan and ingredients she'd bought with her own money. Her pride wouldn't let her use only what he'd provided. This time, she was making something more personal, more complex. If her cooking was somehow the key to Adrian's ability to feel, she was going to give him something worth feeling. Adrian was waiting in the kitchen again, and this time the nervousness on his face was almost endearing. He looked like a man facing something he desperately wanted and was terrified of losing. You came back, he said. I said I would. Nia set down her bags, began unpacking. I thought about what you said, about not tasting anything for 9 years. About how the pasta was like hearing music for the first time. And I realized that if I'm going to do this, if I'm going to cook for you, I should make things that are worth tasting. Not just good food, but food that means something. She pulled out her grandmother's recipe book, worn and stained and precious. My grandmother taught me to cook. She was from Louisiana, grew up poor during the Depression, learned to make magic out of nothing. This book has her recipes, her notes, her whole culinary philosophy. Adrian moved closer, looking at the faded pages with something like reverence. You're going to cook from this? I'm going to make you her gumbo. It takes hours, requires patience and attention and love. And if anything can make you understand what food should taste like, it's this. For the next 3 hours, Nia worked. She made roux from scratch, stirring constantly until it reached the exact shade of dark chocolate her grandmother had insisted on. She chopped the holy trinity of vegetables, onion, celery, bell pepper, with the precision of ritual. She added spices in careful layers, built flavors the way her grandmother had taught her, with patience and intuition and respect for the process. Adrian watched everything, asked occasional questions, helped when she directed him. They fell into an easier rhythm than Tuesday, the silence between them comfortable rather than tense. And when she finally ladled the gumbo into bowls, garnished it with rice and scallions, and set it in front of him, Nia felt the same nervous anticipation she always did when sharing her grandmother's recipes. This is more than just food to you, Adrian said, looking at the bowl. This is my history, my culture, everything my grandmother tried to teach me about life, distilled into a recipe. Nia sat across from him. Food is memory, Adrian. It's love and tradition and connection. If you can taste this, really taste it, then maybe you can understand that. He lifted the spoon, tasted, and Nia watched his expression transform. It was slower this time, more complex than the simple wonder of Tuesday. She saw him process the layers of flavor, the depth, the story the gumbo told. "Tell me what you taste," she said. "Heat. But not just spice, there's warmth to it, like being wrapped in something safe." Adrian took another spoonful, closed his eyes. Richness from the roux, brightness from the vegetables, and something else, something I can't name, like tasting a memory that isn't mine. Nia's throat tightened. That's exactly what it is. You're tasting my grandmother's kitchen, Sunday dinners with family, the feeling of being loved and fed and home. I can feel it. Adrian opened his eyes, and they were bright with emotion. Not just taste it. I can feel what you put into this. They ate in silence for a while, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Nia watched Adrian experience her grandmother's gumbo, saw him process each component, saw the way food was becoming more than just sustenance for him. It was transformation, happening bite by bite. "Can I ask you something?" Adrian said finally. "That depends on the question." "Why cooking? Of all the things you could have done with your life, why choose this?" Nia considered deflecting, but something about the vulnerability in his face made her honest. "Because my childhood was chaos. My parents' divorce, my mom's boyfriends, moving constantly, never having stability. But in the kitchen with my grandmother, everything made sense. There were rules, processes, results you could predict. Food didn't lie, didn't change, didn't leave. Until she died? How did you—" Nia stopped, remembering. "Right, you investigated me. I'm sorry. For what it's worth, I understand. My mother died when I was young. Cancer. I know what it's like to lose the person who made the world make sense." It was the first personal thing Adrian had shared, and Nia felt the shift between them, from transaction toward something closer to connection. "Is that what happened 9 years ago?" she asked carefully. "Did you lose someone?" Adrian's expression closed off immediately. "I told you that's not part of our arrangement. I know." Nia held up her hands. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have asked." "No, He stopped, struggled with something internal. "It's not that I don't want to tell you, it's that I don't know if I can. Talking about it means feeling it, and I've spent 9 years making sure I never have to feel that again. Except now you can feel. Because of me, somehow." "Yes." Adrian met her eyes. "Which means that pain is waiting for me too. Not just the good things, but everything. The grief, the guilt, the rage. All of it." Nia understood then, with sudden clarity. "You're afraid. That's why you're hesitating. Why you're not sure if you want this to continue. Because feeling good means feeling bad too. I've survived 9 years by being numb, by making decisions without emotion, by never letting anything touch me." Adrian's voice was raw. "If that changes, if I become someone who feels again, I don't know if I can do what I do. Be who I am. My entire empire is built on being the man who never flinches." "So you have to choose," Nia said it gently, "between staying safe and staying numb, or risking everything to feel alive again. Is that really a choice?" "Only you can answer that." Adrian stared at his empty bowl, at the evidence of the meal he'd actually tasted, actually felt. When he looked up, his expression was determined. "I'm choosing to feel. Whatever the cost." He reached across the table, stopped just short of touching her hand. "Even if it destroys me." Nia looked at his hand, hovering near hers, and made her own choice. She closed the distance, laced her fingers through his. The reaction was immediate. Adrian's breath caught, his eyes widening as sensation flooded through the contact. Nia felt it too, that electric current, warm and alive and inexplicable. "What is this?" she whispered. "What's happening between us?" "I don't know." Adrian's thumb traced patterns on the back of her hand, each touch sending sparks up her arm. "But I don't want it to stop." They sat like that for a long moment, hands joined across the table, neither wanting to break the connection. And in that moment, Nia understood that she'd crossed a line. This wasn't just a job anymore. This wasn't just about money or solving a mystery. This was about two broken people finding something in each other that they'd thought was lost forever. And that was the most dangerous thing of all. When Nia finally pulled her hand away, the loss of contact felt physical, like tearing off a bandage. Adrian's expression mirrored what she felt, bereft, confused, wanting more. She stood quickly, began clearing plates to give herself something to do with hands that suddenly felt empty. Let me help, Adrian said, rising. They worked in silence, moving around each other in the kitchen with a synchronicity that shouldn't have existed between two people who'd known each other for less than a week. But Nia found herself anticipating his movements, stepping aside before he reached for something, handing him dishes before he asked. "You're good at this," she said, watching him rinse a pot with unexpected competence. "At washing dishes? At being in a kitchen with someone else? Most people get in his way, but you move like you belong here." Adrian's hand stilled in the soapy water. "I used to cook with someone. A long time ago. We had a rhythm, like you said. Like dancing." The past tense hung heavy between them. Nia wanted to ask, wanted to know who had shared his kitchen before everything had gone dark, but she remembered his earlier reaction and held her tongue. "Tuesday and Friday," Adrian said suddenly, breaking the silence. "That's not enough." Nia's heart stuttered. That was the arrangement. "I know, but being able to feel for a few hours twice a week and then going back to nothing for 5 days." He turned to face her, water dripping from his hands. "It's torture, Nia. Knowing what I'm missing, knowing it exists, but I can't access it unless you're here." "What are you asking?" "I don't know." Adrian dried his hands, moved closer. "More time, more meals. I'll pay you more, whatever you want. Just, I need more than this." Every rational part of Nia screamed that this was a bad idea, that she was already in too deep, that letting Adrian Voss become more entangled in her life would only end in disaster. But she looked at his face, at the desperate hope there, and found herself weakening. 3 days a week, she heard herself say. Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. But the extra day we don't just eat. You tell me about yourself. Real things, not surface details. If I'm going to keep doing this, I need to understand who you are. Adrian's jaw clenched. That's not a fair trade. Neither is asking me to restructure my life around your needs. Nia held her ground. You want more time? You pay for it with honesty. The silence stretched taut between them. Nia could see the war on Adrian's face, the desire for more contact with her warring against his instinct to keep everything locked away. Finally, he nodded. Okay, 3 days, starting next week. And the honesty? I'll try. His voice was rough. But I can't promise it won't be difficult. The things worth having usually are. Nia left shortly after, and the entire ride home she questioned her sanity. 3 days a week in Adrian Voss's penthouse, cooking for him, talking with him, touching him. It was too much, too fast, too dangerous. But when she got home and transferred the week's payment, more money than she'd made in 3 months of catering, into her account, when she paid off her most urgent debts and felt the crushing weight lift slightly from her shoulders, she couldn't quite regret it. Jasmine was less understanding. 3 days? She paced Nia's tiny apartment like a caged animal. You barely know this man and you're spending half your week with him? I need the money, Jazz. You know I need the money. Money's not worth your life, and that's what you're gambling with here. Jasmine stopped, faced her. I did some digging this week. Asked around about Adrian Voss. The stories I heard, Nia, he's not just dangerous, he's lethal. People who cross him don't get second chances. I'm not crossing him, I'm cooking for him. You're becoming important to him. That makes you a target. Jasmine's voice softened. I'm worried about you. This isn't like you getting involved with someone like this. I'm not involved with him. Not like that. Aren't you? Jasmine raised an eyebrow. You held his hand, Nia. You're going back 3 times a week. You light up when you talk about making him taste things again. If that's not involvement, I don't know what is. Nia wanted to argue, to insist that Jasmine was wrong, that this was purely transactional, but she couldn't because somewhere in the last week, it had stopped being about money and started being about the way Adrian looked at her. Like she was the answer to every question he'd forgotten how to ask. I'll be careful, she said instead. I promise. Jasmine sighed, pulled her into a hug. I hope that's enough. The weekend passed in a blur of anxiety and anticipation. Nia caught herself planning menus, thinking about what to cook for Adrian, wondering what stories she could pull from him. She researched his business holdings, read every article she could find, tried to piece together the puzzle of who he really was beneath the reputation. What she found was a man who'd built an empire from nothing, who'd taken over his father's struggling shipping business at 23 and transformed it into a multimedia conglomerate. Legitimate on the surface, but with enough gaps and shadows to confirm what everyone whispered about. And then there was the photo from 9 years ago, the one that kept drawing her back. Adrian and the blonde woman, both smiling at some gala event. The caption identified her as Elena Voss, Adrian's wife. Nia had stared at that word for a long time, letting its implications sink in. Wife. Past tense, apparently, because there were no more photos of her after that night. No divorce announcements, no social media presence, nothing. Just Elena Voss, smiling in that photograph, and then gone. Nia didn't sleep well that weekend. Tuesday arrived with unseasonable warmth, a last gasp of autumn before winter settled in. Nia dressed with more care than she wanted to admit, choosing a deep green blouse that Jasmine had once said brought out her eyes. She told herself it was just because she wanted to look professional, but she knew she was lying. Adrian was waiting in the lobby when she arrived, and the surprise on her face must have shown because he smiled. A real smile, warm and slightly sheepish. "I thought I'd escort you up," he said. "If that's okay. It's your building. You can do whatever you want. But I'd prefer to do what you're comfortable with." Adrian pressed the elevator call button, and Nia noticed he was wearing dark jeans instead of the tailored suits she'd seen before. It made him look younger, less intimidating. "How was your weekend?" The question was so normal, so mundane, that it startled a laugh from her. "You want to make small talk?" "I want to know about your life. Isn't that part of our new arrangement? You learn about me, I learn about you." "I don't remember agreeing to that part." "Consider it a bonus." The elevator arrived and they stepped inside. Adrian leaned against the wall, studying her with an intensity that made her skin warm. "So? How was your weekend?" Nia considered deflecting, but something about his genuine curiosity made her honest. "I spent most of it researching you, actually. Reading articles, looking at photos, trying to understand who I'm working for." Adrian's expression didn't change. "And what did you find?" "That you're very good at controlling your public image. That you built an empire in 10 years. That you were married once." She watched his face carefully. "To Elena." The elevator suddenly felt too small. Adrian's jaw clenched, his hands curling into fists at his sides. For a long moment he said nothing, and Nia wondered if she'd pushed too far. "That's the honesty you wanted?" His voice was carefully controlled. "Questions about my dead wife?" "Dead." The word hit Nia like a physical blow. "I'm sorry, I didn't know. The articles didn't say it. They wouldn't. I made sure of that." Adrian pushed off the wall as the elevator reached the penthouse. Some things don't belong in newspapers. He walked out without waiting for her, and Nia followed, her heart in her throat. She'd crossed a line, broken whatever fragile trust they'd been building. But instead of shutting down completely, Adrian went to the windows and stood there, shoulders tight, fighting some internal battle. Nia set down her bags, moved to the kitchen, gave him space. She started pulling out ingredients, trying to focus on cooking instead of the tension radiating from the man across the room. "She died 9 years ago." Adrian's voice carried from the windows, flat and distant. "Car accident. Drunk driver ran a red light, hit her passenger side. She was gone before the ambulance arrived." Nia's hand stilled on the cutting board. "Adrian, you don't have to. You wanted honesty. This is what it looks like." He turned to face her, and his expression was terrible. "We'd been married 3 years. She was pregnant. 7 months. We were going to name her Sophie." The grief in his voice was so raw that Nia felt tears prick her eyes. She'd asked for this, demanded truth as payment, but she hadn't understood what she was asking him to relive. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. I was supposed to drive her that night. Had a meeting that ran late, told her to take a car service. If I'd been there, if I'd been the one driving..." His voice cracked. "The doctor said I experienced acute psychological trauma. That my mind essentially shut down my ability to feel as a defense mechanism, because feeling that much loss, that much guilt, would have destroyed me. So you've been numb for 9 years, unable to feel anything. Until you crashed into me at a gala and somehow broke through walls that a dozen therapists couldn't touch." Adrian moved toward her, slowly, like approaching something wild. "You want to know why I'm obsessed with you? Why I need you here? Because you're the only thing standing between me and 9 more years of being dead inside. Nia's vision blurred with tears. She'd thought she understood, had imagined his trauma was something abstract. But this, losing his wife and unborn daughter, living with that guilt for nearly a decade, this was a wound that would never fully heal. I can't fix you, she said, voice shaking. I can't bring them back or erase what happened. I'm just a person who cooks, Adrian. I'm not salvation. I know. He stopped in front of her, close enough to touch, but not reaching out. But you're something. You're a crack in the wall, a glimpse of what it feels like to be human again. And I'll take that over nothing. They stood in the kitchen, the space between them charged with emotion and possibility. Nia could see the tears tracking down Adrian's face, could feel her own falling, could taste salt on her lips. Let me cook for you, she said softly. Let me give you something good to feel. Adrian nodded, unable to speak, and Nia turned to the counter with shaking hands. She'd planned to make something complex, something that would impress, but now she changed her mind. Instead, she made comfort food, chicken soup from scratch, rich and nourishing, the kind of thing her grandmother made when the world got too heavy. They didn't talk while she cooked. Adrian sat at the counter, watching her work, occasionally wiping his face with the back of his hand. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, just heavy with the weight of what he'd shared. When Nia finally ladled soup into bowls and set one in front of him, Adrian stared at it like he wasn't sure what to do. It's okay to feel sad, Nia said quietly. You've spent 9 years not feeling anything. Let yourself feel this too. Adrian picked up the spoon, tasted, and Nia watched the emotions cross his face. Not joy this time, but something deeper, comfort, memory, grief acknowledged and held. Elena used to make soup when I was stressed, he said. Not as good as this, but she tried. She'd burn the vegetables and oversalt it and serve it with this proud smile like she'd created a masterpiece. And you ate it anyway. Every bite. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. I haven't let myself think about her in years. Couldn't handle it without feeling. But now, he took another spoonful. Now I can remember the good parts too. Not just the loss. They ate in silence, but it was companionable now, shared. And when Adrian reached across the counter and took her hand, Nia didn't pull away. She let him hold on, let herself be the anchor he needed, and tried not to think about what it meant that she wanted to be. Tell me about your grandmother, Adrian said after a while. The one who taught you to cook. So Nia talked. She told him about summers in Louisiana, about learning to make roux at 8 years old, about her grandmother's kitchen with its worn linoleum and ancient stove that somehow produced magic. She told him about the recipes passed down through generations, about the food as love, about losing her grandmother to cancer when she was 19. I understand, Adrian said when she finished, what it's like to lose the person who made you feel safe. Is that what Elena was for you? Yes, and more. He traced patterns on the back of her hand. She was the only person who saw past the reputation, past the business, to who I actually was. When she died, I lost the only witness to my humanity. You're still human, Adrian. You just forgot for a while. Did I? Or did I choose not to be because being human meant feeling pain I couldn't survive? It was a question Nia couldn't answer. They finished their soup, cleaned up together, and when it was time for her to leave, Adrian walked her to the elevator with obvious reluctance. Thursday, he said. You'll come back Thursday? I said I would. And I'll tell you more about my life, about what I do, the parts you probably don't want to know. His expression was serious. You're asking me to be honest, to feel things again. That means you're going to see sides of me that aren't pretty. I can handle it. Can you? Adrian moved closer, and Nia's breath caught. Because the man I am when I can feel, he's going to want things, Nia. Things that go beyond cooking dinner twice a week. The implication in his words made her pulse race. Like what? More of this. He reached out, traced his fingers along her jaw, and the contact sent electricity sparking through her nerves. More time, more touch, more of whatever this connection is between us. And I'm not sure I'll be satisfied with just friendship. Nia should have stepped back, should have reinforced the boundaries they'd barely established. But his touch felt so good, so real, that she found herself leaning into it instead. I'm not ready for more than this, she whispered. I know. I'm just warning you that I will be. Adrian's thumb brushed her lower lip, and Nia's eyes fluttered closed. And when that time comes, I won't be subtle about what I want. He dropped his hand and stepped back, leaving Nia dizzy and wanting. She got into the elevator on unsteady legs, turned to face him, saw the hunger in his expression matched by something in her own chest. Thursday, she said. Thursday, he agreed. The doors closed and Nia sagged against the wall, her heart racing and her skin still tingling where he'd touched her. This was spiraling out of control faster than she could process. What had started as a transaction was becoming something else, something dangerous and intoxicating and completely impossible. She wanted Adrian Voss. Not his money, not the escape he offered from her debts, but him. The broken, grieving, slowly awakening man behind the reputation. And that wanting was going to destroy them both. The next 2 days dragged. Nia went through the motions of her life, meeting with creditors, trying to salvage what remained of her business, avoiding Jasmine's knowing looks. But her mind was elsewhere. She caught herself touching her jaw where Adrian's fingers had traced, remembering the heat in his eyes, wondering what would happen on Thursday. She shouldn't go back. Should call him, cancel, extract herself from this situation before it consumed her completely. But every time she reached for her phone to do exactly that, she remembered the tears on his face when he talked about Elena, the wonder in his voice when he tasted her soup, the raw honesty when he'd admitted he was starting to want more than friendship. He needed her. And that should have terrified her, but instead it made her feel necessary in a way nothing else ever had. Thursday arrived cold and gray, rain slicking the streets and making the city look like a watercolor painting. Nia stood in Adrian's lobby, shaking water from her coat, and tried to calm her racing heart. The elevator ride up felt longer than usual. When the doors opened, Adrian was there, waiting, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath stop. "You came," he said, like he doubted she would. "I keep my promises." "I know. It's one of the things I—" He stopped himself, shook his head. "Come in. Please." Nia stepped off the elevator, acutely aware of how alone they were. No assistants, no security, just the two of them in this enormous penthouse, with the rain drumming against the windows. "I thought we could do something different tonight," Adrian said, leading her to the kitchen. "You've been cooking for me, feeding me, taking care of me. I want to do something for you." "Adrian, you're paying me a fortune. You don't need to—" "Not everything is about the arrangement." He pulled out a bottle of wine, expensive and old. "I want to cook with you tonight. Teach me to make something. Let me contribute instead of just consuming." The request surprised her. "You want to learn to cook?" "I want to understand what you do, how you do it. Want to create something instead of just destroy." His expression was vulnerable in a way that made her chest ache. "Will you show me?" How could she refuse that? Nia nodded, set down her bags, and started pulling out ingredients. "Okay, we're making risotto. It requires patience, attention, constant stirring. You can't rush it or force it. You have to let it become what it's meant to be." "Are we still talking about food?" Adrian's voice held a note of humor she'd never heard before. Nia smiled despite herself. "Maybe not entirely." They worked together, Nia guiding Adrian through each step. His hands were competent despite his claims of being out of practice, and she found herself standing close, correcting his technique, her fingers covering his to show him the right motion for stirring. Every touch was electric. Every brush of their shoulders, every moment their hands met, sent sparks through her system. The kitchen felt too warm, the space too small, the awareness between them too intense to ignore. "Like this?" Adrian asked, and Nia looked up to find his face inches from hers. "Yes," she managed, "exactly like that." Neither of them moved. Rain continued to fall outside, cocooning them in intimacy, and Nia could feel her resolve crumbling. This man, this broken, dangerous, surprisingly gentle man, was looking at her like she was everything, and she wanted nothing more than to close the distance between them. "Nia." Her name was a prayer on his lips. "Tell me to stop." "Stop what?" "This. Wanting you, needing you, falling for you." His hand came up to cup her face, thumb stroking her cheekbone. "Tell me to stop before I do something we can't take back." She should step away, reinforce the boundaries, remember all the reasons this was a terrible idea. but his touch felt so good, so right, and when she looked into his eyes, she saw everything she'd been fighting reflected back at her. I can't, she whispered, because I'm falling too. Adrian's control shattered. He kissed her with a desperation that stole her breath, one hand tangling in her hair while the other pulled her closer. Nia melted into him, rising on her toes to meet his kiss, her hands fisting in his shirt. It was everything and too much and not nearly enough. She could feel his heart hammering against her chest, could taste wine on his lips, could hear the small sound he made when she kissed him back with equal fervor. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. I can feel everything, he said roughly. Your warmth, your taste, the way you fit against me. It's overwhelming and perfect, and I never want it to stop. Adrian, I know this is complicated and dangerous, and probably the worst idea either of us has ever had. He pulled back enough to look at her. But I haven't felt alive in 9 years, Nia. And with you, I feel everything. I'm not giving that up. I'm not giving you up. Nia's heart was racing so fast she felt dizzy. This changes everything. I know. Your world, my safety, the arrangement. I'll protect you. Whatever it takes, whoever I have to threaten or destroy, you'll be safe. Adrian's voice was absolute. You're mine now, Nia, and I protect what's mine. The possessiveness should have frightened her, should have sent her running, but instead it made something warm unfurl in her chest, made her feel claimed in a way that was both terrifying and exhilarating. The risotto's burning, she said weakly. Adrian laughed, actually laughed, the sound rich and genuine. Let it burn, I'd rather kiss you. So they did, abandoning dinner for something more essential, and Nia let herself fall into Adrian Voss completely, consequences be damned. They eventually salvaged the risotto, laughing as they scraped the slightly burnt bottom layer from the pan and started fresh. But everything had shifted. The air between them hummed with new awareness, every accidental touch deliberate now, every glance loaded with meaning. Nia found herself hyper-conscious of Adrian's proximity as they cooked, the way his shoulder brushed hers when he reached for the wine, the heat of his body when he leaned over to watch her stir, the intensity of his gaze that followed her every movement. You're staring, she said, not looking up from the pan. I'm appreciating. Adrian's voice was low, intimate. There's a difference. Is there? One is passive observation, the other is active admiration. He moved behind her, his chest against her back, and placed his hands over hers on the wooden spoon. Like this. I'm not just watching you cook, I'm feeling how you move, understanding the rhythm, learning what matters to you. Nia's breath caught as his warmth enveloped her. And what matters to me? Precision, care, the way you treat each ingredient with respect, like it has something to offer if you just pay attention. His breath stirred her hair. You cook the way you live, with intention and grace and a refusal to settle for less than extraordinary. You barely know how I live. I know enough. Adrian's arms tightened slightly around her. I know you built a business from nothing because you refused to execute someone else's vision. I know you work 3 times as hard as anyone else because you're trying to prove you deserve to be here. I know you're terrified of failing, but more terrified of never trying. The accuracy of his observations made Nia's throat tight. You've been paying attention to everything about you, from the moment you crashed into my life. He pressed a kiss to her temple, soft and reverent. You're the most interesting thing that's happened to me in a decade, Nia. Of course I'm paying attention. They finished cooking in companionable silence, but the tension between them remained electric. When Nia finally plated the risotto, creamy and perfect despite its rough start, and they sat down to eat, she could barely taste it for the awareness of Adrian across from her. Tell me something, Adrian said between bites. Something you've never told anyone else. Nia considered deflecting, but after everything he'd shared, after the vulnerability of his confession about Elena, she owed him honesty. I'm terrified that I'm not good enough. That no matter how hard I work or how much I sacrifice, I'll always be the girl from the wrong side of town, pretending to belong in a world that will never accept her. Adrian's expression softened. You know that's not true. Do I? Look at my life, Adrian. Failed business, crushing debt, living in a studio apartment that's one rent increase away from being too expensive. I'm 26, and I have nothing to show for all my education and effort except a catering company that's hemorrhaging money. You have talent. You have vision. You have the ability to make a man who hasn't felt anything in 9 years taste food again. Adrian reached across the table, took her hand. That's not nothing, Nia. That's extraordinary. That's you being kind because I'm feeding you. That's me being honest because you deserve to know how remarkable you are. He squeezed her fingers. And for what it's worth, I grew up on the wrong side of town, too. My father was a dock worker who drank too much and hit too hard. My mother cleaned houses to keep us fed. I know what it feels like to not belong, to fight for every scrap of respect. Nia stared at him, trying to reconcile this information with the polished, powerful man before her. How did you get from there to here? Determination, ruthlessness, a willingness to do things other people wouldn't. Adrian's voice went flat. My father had connections to some unsavory people. When he died, I inherited those connections along with his debts. I paid them off by working for them, learned how they operated, and eventually took over. Built something bigger than any of them imagined. By doing what, exactly? Things you don't want to know about. His jaw tightened. I told you this would get ugly, Nia. The man I am, what I've done to build this empire, it's not a story with heroes. Try me. Adrian studied her for a long moment, as if weighing how much truth she could handle. I run protection rackets, smuggle goods through my shipping companies, launder money through my restaurants. I've had people hurt who crossed me, killed when they became too dangerous to leave alive. I've built an empire on fear and violence and the willingness to do whatever it takes to maintain power. The words should have horrified her, should have sent her running for the elevator in safety. But Nia found herself nodding, absorbing this confirmation of what she'd already suspected. Have you ever hurt someone who didn't deserve it? She asked quietly. Define deserve. Adrian's expression was grim. I've made judgment calls that resulted in collateral damage, destroyed businesses to send messages, ruined lives to protect my own interests. Whether those people deserved it depends on your definition of justice. But you've never hurt someone innocent, someone who wasn't involved in your world. No, I have rules, lines I don't cross. He met her eyes. But that doesn't make me a good man, Nia. It just makes me a monster with boundaries. She should be afraid, should be repulsed by these casual admissions of violence and criminality, but instead she felt oddly calm, like some part of her had known all along and had chosen him anyway. Thank you for being honest, she said. Adrian's laugh was bitter. That's it? I tell you, I've had people killed and you thank me for my honesty? You told me the truth when you could have lied, when most people would have lied. Nia stood, walked around the table, and sat in his lap before she could second-guess the impulse. I'm not naive enough to think you're perfect, Adrian. I knew what you were before I agreed to this, but I need to know you'll always be honest with me, even when the truth is ugly. Adrian's arms came around her automatically, holding her close. I'll never lie to you. That's a promise. They sat like that for a long moment, Nia's head on his shoulder, Adrian's hand stroking her back. The confession should have created distance between them, but instead it felt like the opposite, like the last barrier had fallen, leaving them exposed and honest and irrevocably connected. What happens now? Nia asked into the quiet. Now you decide if you can accept who I am. What I do? Adrian's voice was carefully neutral, but she could feel the tension in his body. If you can't, I'll understand. I'll still pay you what I owe, still clear your debts. But the rest of this, whatever's developing between us, that ends. Nia lifted her head to look at him. And if I stay? Then you're mine, completely. His eyes were intense, searching. I'll protect you, provide for you, give you everything you need to build the life you want. But I'll also expect loyalty, honesty, and acceptance of who I am. All of me, not just the parts that are easy to love. That sounds like a very unequal arrangement. Does it? Because from where I'm sitting, I'm the one getting the better deal. Adrian cupped her face in his hands. You give me the ability to feel, Nia, to taste and touch and experience the world like a human being instead of a ghost. That's priceless. Everything I'm offering is just an attempt to balance the scales. Nia searched his expression, looking for deception or manipulation, but found only raw sincerity. This dangerous, powerful man was laying himself bare before her, offering everything he had, and asking only that she accept him. "I'm staying," she said. Adrian's expression transformed, relief and joy, and something deeper flooding his features. He kissed her then, slow and thorough and full of promise. And Nia kissed him back with a certainty that should have terrified her but instead felt like coming home. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. "I need to tell you something," he said, "about the danger you're in now." Nia's contentment evaporated. "What danger?" "The moment you became important to me, you became a target." Adrian's voice was grim. "I have enemies, Nia. People who would love nothing more than to hurt me by hurting the people I care about. And now that includes you." "How many enemies are we talking about?" "Enough that you need protection. I'm assigning security to you starting tomorrow. They'll be discreet, but they'll always be there." Nia pulled back, alarm bells ringing. "Adrian, I can't live under constant surveillance. I have a life, a business that's failing, and a life that puts you in public, vulnerable spaces." His grip tightened. "I'm not negotiating this, Nia. Either you accept protection, or I lock you in this penthouse where I can guarantee your safety." "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious about anything." Adrian's expression was unyielding. "I lost Elena because I wasn't paranoid enough, wasn't careful enough. I won't make that mistake again." The grief in his voice softened Nia's anger. She could see the fear beneath his control, the terror that history would repeat itself. But she also couldn't accept being caged, no matter how golden the cage. "Okay," she said carefully. "Protection, but discreet. No armed guards following me into the grocery store. No one interfering with my work or my life. They're there to watch, not to control. Agreed?" Adrian's jaw clenched, clearly unhappy with the compromise, but he nodded. "Agreed. But if the threat level increases, that deal is off the table." "Fair enough?" Nia settled back against his chest, trying to process this new reality. "Who are your enemies, specifically?" "The Kozlov family is the most immediate concern. Dmitry Kozlov is young, ambitious, and trying to expand into territories I control. We've had an uneasy truce for the past few months, but that won't last." "What will happen when it breaks?" "War, quick, brutal, and bloody." Adrian's voice was matter-of-fact. "I'll crush him before he has a chance to become a real threat." "Send a message to anyone else thinking about challenging me." The casual way he discussed violence made Nia's stomach turn, but she forced herself to stay calm. This was his world, the reality she'd chosen to accept. "And me? What's my role in all this?" "You stay safe. You let my people protect you, and you trust that I'll handle everything else." Adrian kissed the top of her head. "I need you to trust me, Nia. Can you do that?" Could she? Trust a man who admitted to having people killed, who built his empire on fear, who was preparing for war with rival criminals? Every rational part of her brain screamed no, but when she looked into his eyes and saw the desperate need there, she found herself nodding. "I trust you," she said, and meant it. The relief on Adrian's face was profound. He held her tighter, buried his face in her hair, and for a moment he was just a man grateful not to be alone anymore. They spent the rest of the evening talking, sharing stories from their pasts, learning each other's histories. Nia told him about her failed attempts at traditional employment, about the restaurants that had tried to change her vision, about the moment she'd decided to strike out on her own. Adrian told her about building his business from his father's debts, about the first time he'd had to make a hard choice between mercy and survival, about the lonely years after Elena's death when the world had gone gray. "I don't want to replace her," Nia said at one point. "Elena, I can't be her for you." "I don't want you to be." Adrian's voice was firm. "Elena was my past. You're my present, and if I'm lucky, my future. They're completely different things." Do you still love her?" "I'll always love her. She was my wife, the mother of my child, who never got to be born." Adrian met Nia's eyes. "But that love doesn't diminish what I'm starting to feel for you. The heart isn't a finite resource, Nia. It expands to hold what matters." The maturity of his answer made Nia's chest ache. She'd been so worried about being compared to a ghost, about not measuring up to a dead woman's memory. But Adrian was right. This was different, new, its own thing entirely. By the time Nia left that night, it was past midnight. Adrian walked her down to the car, kissed her goodbye like a man reluctant to let her go, and made her promise to text when she got home safely. "Tomorrow's Friday," he said. "Same time?" "Same time." Nia smiled up at him. "And Adrian, thank you for trusting me with the truth. Thank you for not running when you heard it." He kissed her once more, soft and sweet. "Sleep well, Nia." The drive home felt surreal. Nia touched her lips, still feeling the ghost of Adrian's kisses, and tried to process everything that had happened. She'd gone from struggling caterer to the girlfriend of a crime lord in less than 2 weeks. It should have felt wrong, rushed, dangerous. Instead, it felt inevitable. Jasmine was waiting on her doorstep again, and this time her expression was thunderous. "You're glowing," she said flatly. "Please tell me you didn't do what I think you did." Nia unlocked her door, gestured Jasmine inside. "Depends on what you think I did. Sleep with Adrian Voss." "I didn't sleep with him." Nia dropped her bag, collapsed on the couch. "But I kissed him, and told him I'm staying, and agreed to let his security team follow me around." "Nia." Jasmine's voice was anguished. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that for the first time in my life, someone sees me, really sees me, all of me, and wants me anyway." Nia met her friend's eyes. "I'm thinking that I'm tired of being safe and scared and small. I'm thinking that maybe loving someone dangerous is better than loving no one at all." "Loving?" Jasmine sat down heavily. "You're in love with him?" "Was she?" Nia examined her feelings honestly, looking for the truth beneath the attraction and gratitude and excitement. What she found was something deeper than she'd expected, a connection that felt essential, like Adrian had become necessary to her continued existence. "I think I might be," she admitted, "or at least falling that way." "Oh, honey," Jasmine pulled her into a hug. "You know this can't end well, right? Men like Adrian Voss don't get happy endings." "Maybe not, but I'd rather have something real and temporary than safe and empty forever." Jasmine held her for a long time, and Nia let herself be held, let herself acknowledge the fear beneath her certainty. Because Jasmine was right, this probably wouldn't end well. Adrian lived in a world of violence and danger, and she was stepping into that world with her eyes open. But when she thought about his smile, about the tears on his face when he'd tasted her cooking, about the way he'd looked at her like she was the answer to every question he'd forgotten how to ask, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. The next morning, Nia woke to a text from an unknown number. "This is Marcus Chen, head of Mr. Voss's security. I'll be coordinating your protection detail. 2 members of my team will shadow you starting today. You won't see them unless there's a problem. If you need anything, call this number." So it was real. She had bodyguards now. Nia got dressed, half expecting to see armed men outside her apartment, but the hallway was empty. Either they were very good at being discreet, or this was all an elaborate bluff. She found out which when she left for the grocery store and noticed the same black sedan 3 cars back in every direction she turned. And again when she met Jasmine for coffee and spotted a man in a suit reading a newspaper who happened to be at 3 different locations throughout the afternoon. It should have felt invasive, but instead it felt oddly comforting. Adrian was keeping his promise, protecting her even when he wasn't there. Friday's dinner was different from the others. Adrian had the table set formally, with candles and wine and an intimacy that made Nia's heart race. She cooked while he watched, the air between them charged with anticipation, and when they finally sat down to eat, it felt less like a transaction and more like a date. "I have something for you," Adrian said after they'd finished the main course. He pulled out an envelope, slid it across the table. Inside was a check for an amount that made Nia's breath stop. This is too much," she stammered. "Our agreement was $50,000 for 3 months. This is double that, plus enough to restart your business properly. Equipment, space, marketing, everything you need." Adrian's expression was serious. "I want you to succeed, Nia. Not because of me, not because you're cooking for me, but because you deserve to build the life you've been working toward." "I can't accept this." "Yes, you can. Consider it an investment. I'm betting on you, Nia Carter. Don't make me regret it." Nia stared at the check, at this life-changing amount of money, at the man who was offering it without strings or expectations. Tears blurred her vision. "Why?" she whispered. "Why are you doing this?" "Because you gave me my life back. Because you see me as human instead of monster. Because I—" Adrian stopped, seemed to struggle with the words. "Because I care about you, Nia. More than I've cared about anyone in 9 years. And I take care of the people I care about." She should say no. Should maintain some independence, some separation between his world and hers. But when she looked at Adrian's face, at the vulnerable hope there, she couldn't bring herself to refuse. "Thank you," she said, voice shaking. "I don't know how to thank you enough. Be happy. Build something amazing. Stay safe." Adrian stood, came around the table, pulled her to her feet. "That's all the thanks I need." He kissed her then, deep and claiming, and Nia melted into him, letting herself be held and cherished and protected. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. "Stay tonight," he said. I'm not asking you to sleep with me. Just stay. Let me hold you. Let me wake up with you here and know that you're real." Every warning bell in Nia's head went off. Staying meant crossing another line, meant acknowledging that this had moved beyond any professional arrangement into something real and dangerous and undeniable. "Okay," she heard herself say. "I'll stay." Adrian's smile was brilliant, transforming his face into something young and hopeful and beautiful. He led her to his bedroom, enormous and decorated in the same minimalist style as the rest of the penthouse, and pulled her down onto the bed. They didn't have sex. Instead, they lay tangled together, talking in the darkness about everything and nothing. Adrian told her about his childhood, about the father who'd taught him violence was the answer to every problem, about the mother who'd loved him but couldn't protect him. Nia told him about her parents' bitter divorce, about feeling like she was never quite good enough for either of them, about finding refuge in her grandmother's kitchen. "We're both broken," Adrian said at one point, his fingers tracing patterns on her arm, both looking for something to fill the empty spaces. "Maybe that's why this works. We recognize the damage in each other. Or maybe we're just two people who got lucky enough to find each other." He kissed her temple. "Either way, I'm not letting you go." Nia fell asleep in his arms, feeling safer than she had in years, and didn't wake until sunlight was streaming through the windows. For a moment she was disoriented, couldn't remember where she was. Then she felt Adrian's warmth behind her, his arm heavy across her waist, his breath stirring her hair. "Morning," he murmured, voice rough with sleep. "Did you rest well?" "Better than I have in months." Nia turned in his arms, studied his face in the morning light. He looked younger like this, unguarded, the harsh lines smoothed by sleep. "You?" "I haven't slept that well in 9 years. Adrian smiled, soft and genuine. "Turns out having you here quiets all the noise in my head." They stayed in bed for another hour, talking and kissing and learning each other's rhythms. And when Nia finally left dressed in one of Adrian's shirts because her clothes from the night before felt wrong, she carried with her the knowledge that she'd passed some invisible threshold. This wasn't temporary anymore. This wasn't just about money or healing or obligation. This was real, and that reality was about to be tested in ways neither of them could predict. The first warning came 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday that started like any other. Nia was at the commercial kitchen space she'd rented with Adrian's investment, testing recipes for the soft opening of her new restaurant, when Marcus Chen appeared in the doorway with an expression that made her stomach drop. "We need to move you," he said without preamble. "Now." Nia set down her knife, heart already racing. "What happened?" Kozlov made a move, hit one of Mr. Voss's warehouses last night, killed 3 men. Marcus was already scanning the space, calculating exits. "Intelligence suggests you're next on the list. They know about you, know what you mean to him." The words hit like a physical blow. Nia had known intellectually that she was in danger, had accepted Adrian's protection as a necessary precaution, but hearing that someone wanted to hurt her, to use her as a weapon against Adrian, made it horrifyingly real. "Where's Adrian?" she managed. "Handling the situation? He sent me to get you somewhere safe." Marcus moved closer, his voice gentler. "Miss Carter." I need you to trust me. Leave everything, come with me now, and I'll explain on the way. Nia looked around the kitchen, her dream finally taking shape after years of struggle. New equipment gleamed under industrial lighting, ingredients she'd carefully sourced lined the shelves, menu plans covered the walls. Walking away felt like abandoning everything she'd worked for. But staying meant risking her life. She grabbed her bag, followed Marcus to the armored SUV waiting outside, and tried not to think about how quickly her new reality had turned dangerous. The vehicle had bulletproof glass and reinforced doors, and there were 2 more security personnel inside, both armed and grim-faced. "Where are we going?" Nia asked as they pulled into traffic. "Safe house outside the city. Mr. Voss is meeting us there." Marcus navigated through streets with practiced efficiency. The Kozlov situation has escalated faster than we anticipated. Dmitri's desperate, making reckless moves. That makes him unpredictable and dangerous. "How long do I have to hide?" "As long as it takes for Mr. Voss to neutralize the threat." Marcus glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "I won't lie to you, Miss Carter. This could get ugly. But Adrian's the best at what he does. He'll end this." The safe house turned out to be a sprawling estate an hour outside the city. All stone walls and security gates and enough isolation to feel like the edge of the world. Marcus escorted her inside, showed her to a bedroom that was comfortable but felt like a cage, and left her with a promise that Adrian would arrive soon. Nia sat on the bed, staring at her phone, fighting the urge to call Jasmine and tell her everything. But Marcus had been clear. No contact with anyone until the situation was resolved. She was cut off, hidden away, waiting for a man to fight a war on her behalf. The hours crawled. Nia paced the room, stared out windows that overlooked empty fields, tried not to imagine what Adrian was doing in the city. Was he hunting Dmitri? Planning retaliation? Had anyone else been hurt? Night fell before Adrian finally arrived. Nia heard the commotion downstairs. Voices, footsteps, the sense of urgency that came with his presence. And then her door opened and he was there. He looked terrible. Blood spattered his shirt, exhaustion carved lines around his eyes, and his hands were shaking slightly with what might have been adrenaline or rage or both. But when he saw her, his expression transformed into pure relief. "You're safe," he said, voice rough. "Thank God you're safe." Nia crossed the room in 3 steps and threw her arms around him, holding tight, even though he smelled like smoke and copper. Adrian buried his face in her hair, his arms like steel bands around her waist. "I was so scared," he whispered. "When Marcus told me they were targeting you, that they knew where to find you. I've never been that terrified in my life." "I'm okay. I'm here." Nia pulled back enough to look at his face. "Adrian, what happened? Whose blood is that?" "Not mine." His jaw clenched. 3 of Dmitri's men thought they could take one of my shipments. They were wrong." The implication made Nia's stomach turn, but she forced herself to stay calm. "Did you kill them?" "2 of them. The 3rd is being questioned." Adrian's expression was cold, the crime lord sliding into place. "By tomorrow, I'll know everything about Dmitri's operation, where he is, who's helping him, what he's planning, and then I'll end this." "How?" Quickly, brutally, completely. Adrian cupped her face in his hands, and his touch was gentle despite the violence in his words. "I'm going to eliminate every person who could ever threaten you, Nia. I'm going to make sure you can walk through this city without fear, whatever it takes." The absoluteness in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, she felt oddly protected, like Adrian was a wall between her and the chaos of his world. "I don't want you to become a monster because of me," she said softly. "I've always been a monster. You just made me a monster with something to protect." Adrian kissed her forehead. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be difficult." But Nia couldn't rest. She lay in the unfamiliar bed, listening to Adrian's voice filtering up from downstairs as he coordinated with his people, and felt the weight of what she'd become to him. She wasn't just someone he cared about anymore. She was his vulnerability, his weakness, the thing his enemies would use to hurt him, and he was preparing to go to war because of it. Morning brought Marcus with breakfast and news. Mr. Voss located Dmitri Kozlov. He's moving on the location this afternoon. Nia's blood went cold. Moving how? With enough men and firepower to ensure there's no second attempt. Marcus's expression was neutral. He's asked that you stay here until he returns, for your safety. I want to talk to him. He's in meetings, final preparations. I don't care. I need to see him before he... Before he what? Before he killed people? Before he risked his own life? Nia couldn't finish the sentence. Marcus studied her for a moment, then nodded. Wait here. Adrian appeared 10 minutes later, dressed in black tactical gear that made him look like a soldier heading to war, which, Nia supposed, he was. You shouldn't see me like this, he said from the doorway. I need to see all of you, even this part. Nia stood, crossed to him. Adrian, please, don't do this. There has to be another way. There isn't. Dmitri won't stop until he's destroyed or I am, and I won't risk your life on the possibility of negotiation. Adrian's voice was firm. This ends today. What if you don't come back? I will. You can't promise that. Nia's voice broke. You're walking into a fight that could get you killed, and I can't lose you. Not now. Adrian pulled her close, held her like she was the only thing keeping him grounded. I've survived worse than Dmitri Kozlov. I've survived 9 years of being dead inside. Survived losing everything that mattered. I'm not going to die now that I finally have a reason to live. Promise me. Nia looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. Promise me you'll come back. I promise. He kissed her, deep and claiming and full of desperate emotion. I love you, Nia. I should have said it sooner, should have told you every day since I realized it. But I love you, and I'm coming back to you. The confession stole her breath. I love you too, so much it terrifies me. Good. Hold on to that terror. Let it remind you why I'm doing this. Adrian kissed her once more, then pulled away. Stay here. Stay safe. And when I get back, we're going to talk about our future. He left before she could respond, and Nia collapsed on the bed, shaking with fear and helplessness. The man she loved was about to walk into violence, and there was nothing she could do but wait and pray he survived. The hours that followed were the longest of Nia's life. She tried to cook in the safe house kitchen, anything to occupy her hands and mind, but couldn't focus. Tried to read, to sleep, to do anything but imagine Adrian bleeding out in some warehouse while she sat useless and protected. Marcus checked on her periodically, his expression carefully neutral, offering no information about what was happening. The security team remained on high alert, stationed at every entrance, ready for an attack that might never come. It was dark when the call finally came. Marcus answered his phone, listened, and his expression transformed into something close to relief. It's over, he told Nia. Mr. Voss is on his way back. Is he hurt? Minor injuries, nothing serious. Marcus smiled slightly. He asked me to tell you he kept his promise. Nia waited in the main room, too anxious to sit, too terrified to think. When she finally heard the vehicles approaching, heard the doors opening and voices in the foyer, her legs nearly gave out. Adrian walked in looking like he'd been through hell. His tactical gear was torn and blood-stained, a gash across his cheekbone leaked red, and he moved with a slight limp. But he was alive, whole, and when he saw her, his expression crumbled. It's done, he said hoarsely. Dmitri's dead. His entire operation is dismantled. You're safe. Nia ran to him, not caring about the blood or the weapons or the violence he carried with him. She threw her arms around his neck and kissed him with all the fear and relief and love she'd been holding back. Adrian kissed her back desperately, lifting her off the ground, holding her like she might disappear if he let go. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead to hers. I need to get cleaned up. Then we need to talk. He showered while Nia waited, her mind racing with possibilities. What did he want to talk about? Their future? The danger? Whether she could handle being with someone who just killed people to protect her? When Adrian emerged, dressed in clean clothes with his injuries bandaged, he looked exhausted but determined. He took her hand, led her to a private study, and closed the door. I need you to understand what happened today, he said without preamble. I killed 4 men, shot 2 of them myself, had my people handle the others. Dmitri died begging for mercy I didn't give him. Adrian's eyes were hard. I did it without hesitation, without remorse, because he threatened you, and I'd do it again without question. Nia swallowed hard. I know. Do you? Do you really understand what that means? Adrian moved closer. It means I'm willing to burn the world down to keep you safe. It means there's no line I won't cross, no boundary I won't violate, if it means protecting you. That kind of obsession, that kind of possession, most people would call it unhealthy. What do you call it? Love. The only kind I'm capable of anymore. Adrian cupped her face in his hands. But you need to decide if you can live with that. If you can accept being with someone who will always choose violence when you're threatened, who will make decisions you might not agree with, who will protect you whether you want it or not. Naya looked into his eyes and saw the fear there. The terror that she'd reject him, walk away, prove that he was too damaged to deserve love. And she made her choice. I can live with it, she said firmly, because I understand now. You lost Elena and your daughter because you weren't careful enough, weren't paranoid enough. You've spent 9 years making sure you'd never feel that pain again. And now that you can feel, now that you care about me, you're terrified of losing someone else. Adrian's breath caught. Yes. So you do what you know how to do. You eliminate threats, you control variables, you make the world safe through force and fear. Naya took his hands. I'm not going to ask you to change that, Adrian. I'm not going to ask you to be someone you're not. But I am going to ask you to trust me to handle some things myself, to let me have a say in decisions that affect my life. Can you do that? The struggle was visible on his face, the desire to agree warring with his instinct to control everything. Finally, he nodded. I'll try. It won't be easy, and I'll probably fail sometimes. But I'll try. Adrian pulled her close. Because losing you would destroy me worse than losing Elena did. At least then I could go numb. Now that I can feel again, losing you would be agony I'd have to experience fully. Then don't lose me. Keep me safe. Protect me when I need it. But also trust me to be your partner, not your possession. Nia kissed him softly. We do this together or not at all? Together, Adrian agreed. Starting now. He pulled a small box from his pocket, and Nia's heart stopped. Adrian opened it to reveal a ring, simple, elegant, a single diamond that caught the light and threw rainbows. This is insane, he said with a self-deprecating smile. We've known each other a month. Most people would say this is too fast, too reckless, too much. Adrian, but I've wasted 9 years being careful and dead inside. I don't want to waste another minute pretending I don't know what I want. Adrian dropped to one knee, and Nia's vision blurred with tears. Nia Carter, you gave me my life back. You made me feel human again. You've accepted every dark part of me and chosen to stay anyway. Will you marry me? Every rational thought screamed that this was too fast, too intense, too dangerous. But Nia looked at this broken, violent, fiercely loving man and knew her answer with absolute certainty. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. Adrian's smile was brilliant as he slipped the ring onto her finger. He stood, lifted her into his arms, and kissed her with a joy that made her chest ache. When he finally set her down, both of them were crying and laughing and holding each other like they'd never let go. We're getting married as soon as possible, Adrian said. I'm not waiting months for some elaborate ceremony. I want you to be my wife, legally and irrevocably, before anything else can go wrong. What about my restaurant, the opening? We'll make it work. Get married, then focus on your business. I'll support whatever you want to build, Nia. Your dreams are my dreams now. They spent that night at the safe house, wrapped around each other, making plans and promises and love. And when they finally returned to the city 2 days later, after Adrian had confirmed every threat was neutralized, Nia felt like she was stepping into a new life. The restaurant opened 3 months later, to reviews that exceeded Nia's wildest expectations. Critics praised her innovative fusion of traditional Louisiana cooking with modern techniques, her commitment to quality ingredients, her ability to make food that felt like home. Within weeks, reservations were booked months in advance. Adrian was at the opening night, proud and possessive, introducing Nia to business contacts and society figures who'd never taken her seriously before. And when a food critic asked how she'd managed to launch such an ambitious venture so quickly, Nia smiled and said it was a combination of talent, determination, and believing in herself. She didn't mention the man who'd invested in her dreams, who'd cleared away obstacles and threats, who'd given her the freedom to create without fear. That was their private story, the foundation of a love that had started with a collision and grown into something unbreakable. They were married in a small ceremony a month after the restaurant opened. No grand affair, no society pageantry, just Jasmine as witness, and a judge who asked no questions about the speed of their courtship. Adrian slipped a wedding band onto Nia's finger with hands that shook slightly, and when he kissed her as his wife, there were tears on both their faces. "I never thought I'd have this again," he whispered against her lips. "A future, a partner, a reason to build instead of destroy." "You have all of that and more," Nia assured him. "We're going to build something beautiful together." And they did. Over the next year, Nia's restaurant became one of the city's most celebrated, while Adrian began the slow process of legitimizing more of his business operations. He'd never be completely clean, his past and his nature wouldn't allow it, but he started stepping back from the most violent aspects of his empire, delegating to trusted lieutenants while he focused on ventures that didn't require bloodshed. "You're changing me," he told Nia one night as they lay in bed in the penthouse that had become their home. "Making me want to be better. You're changing yourself. I'm just giving you a reason to try." Nia traced the scars on his chest, evidence of a violent life she'd chosen to accept. "But I love who you are, Adrian, both the man who makes me breakfast and the one who'd kill to protect me. All of you. Even when I'm overbearing and controlling? Even then, though I still reserve the right to tell you when you're being ridiculous." Nia smiled up at him. "Like when you tried to buy out my entire reservation book so we could have the restaurant to ourselves. That was romantic. That was insane. I run a business, not a private dining room for your whims." Adrian laughed, the sound rich and genuine, and pulled her closer. "Fine, but I'm still bringing armed security when we go out. That's non-negotiable, I know." Nia kissed his jaw. "I've accepted that I'll never go anywhere without someone watching my back. It's a small price for loving you. Is it worth it? The security, the restrictions, the danger that comes with being my wife?" Nia considered the question honestly. Her life had changed in ways she never could have imagined. She had bodyguards, lived in a penthouse, moved through circles of wealth and power she'd once only glimpsed from a distance. But she also had love, success, and a partner who saw her as an equal despite his protective instincts. "Yes," she said firmly, "every moment is worth it." 6 months later, Nia discovered she was pregnant. She stared at the positive test in disbelief, then joy, then terror. A baby. She was going to have Adrian's baby. The man who'd lost a daughter before she was born was getting a second chance. She told him that night over dinner, too nervous to wait for the right moment. Adrian froze with his fork halfway to his mouth, his expression cycling through shock and fear and overwhelming emotion. "Say something," Nia pleaded. "I'm terrified," Adrian admitted, setting down his fork with a shaking hand. "I lost Sophie before I ever got to meet her. The thought of something happening to this baby, to you, nothing's going to happen." Nia moved to his side, took his hands. "We're going to be careful. I'm going to have the best medical care, and you're going to drive me crazy with your overprotectiveness. But we're going to have a baby, Adrian. Our baby." Adrian pulled her into his lap, buried his face in her neck, and she felt wetness against her skin. "I don't deserve this. Don't deserve you, or this second chance, or any of it. Yes, you do. You deserve happiness and family and a future that's more than just survival." Nia tilted his face up to look at her. "We're going to do this together, and it's going to be beautiful." The pregnancy was difficult. Nia suffered from severe morning sickness and anxiety that matched Adrian's paranoia, but they made it through together. Adrian attended every doctor's appointment, held her hair when she was sick, and talked to her growing belly like the baby could already understand him. "Your mother is the strongest person I know," he told the bump one night, "and she saved my life without even trying. You're going to be so loved, little one, so protected and cherished and wanted." Their daughter was born on a spring morning, healthy and screaming and absolutely perfect. Adrian held her with shaking hands, tears streaming down his face, and looked at Nia with such profound gratitude that it made her chest ache. "Thank you," he whispered, "for giving me everything, for making me whole again, for this perfect, impossible gift." "We made her together," Nia said, exhausted and happy. "What should we name her?" Adrian looked at his daughter, their daughter, for a long moment. "Hope. We should name her Hope, because that's what she is. That's what you both are. So Hope Voss entered the world surrounded by love, protected by a father who would burn cities down for her, and a mother who'd chosen love over safety. And as Nia watched Adrian cradle their daughter, singing softly to soothe her cries, she thought about the collision that had started all of this. One moment, one accident, one crash that had awakened a man who'd been dead inside for 9 years. From that chaos had come love, partnership, family, and a future neither of them had dared to imagine. Adrian was right. They were both broken when they met, both looking for something to fill the empty spaces. But they'd found more than that. They'd found each other, and in finding each other, they'd found themselves. Nia's restaurant thrived, becoming a fixture in the city's culinary scene and eventually expanding to a second location. Adrian continued stepping back from his darker enterprises, though he never fully left that world behind. Some things, he explained to Nia, couldn't be abandoned without creating power vacuums that would put them all in danger. But he was more careful now, more strategic, prioritizing his family over expansion or revenge. Hope grew into a bright, curious toddler who had her mother's eyes and her father's stubborn determination. And when Nia got pregnant again 2 years later, with twins this time, Adrian's joy was tempered by experience but no less profound. "Our family," he said one night, watching Nia read to Hope while his hands rested on her pregnant belly. "I never thought I'd have this again. Never thought I deserved it." "You deserve all of it," Nia assured him. "You've built a life worth living, Adrian. Not just survived, but actually lived. Because of you. All because you crashed into me at a gala and somehow broke through walls I'd spent 9 years building." Nia smiled, remembering that night with perfect clarity. "Best accident of my life." "Mine too." Adrian kissed her temple, then bent to kiss Hope goodnight. "The best and most necessary accident of my life." They built their future one day at a time, cooking together, raising their children, balancing Nia's culinary empire with Adrian's more complicated business interests. It wasn't perfect. Adrian still struggled with his controlling instincts, Nia still fought for independence, and they both lived with the knowledge that danger would always be part of their reality. But they had each other. They had love that had survived trauma and violence and impossible odds. They had a family that proved redemption was possible, that people could change, that even the most broken hearts could heal given the right person to help hold the pieces together. Years later, when Nia's restaurants had become legendary and their children were grown and asking about how their parents met, Nia would tell them the truth. That sometimes love comes from the most unexpected collisions. That broken people can find wholeness in each other. That choosing to love someone dangerous, complicated, and deeply flawed can be the bravest and most rewarding decision of your life. And Adrian, listening to his wife tell their story, would hold her hand and remember the moment everything changed. The moment a young caterer crashed into him at a gala and woke him from 9 years of living death. The moment sensation returned in a flood of champagne and embarrassment and electric connection. The moment he started feeling again. That moment had led to all of this. The family, the love, the life he'd thought was lost forever. And he would be grateful for it every day for the rest of his life. Because Nia Carter hadn't just given him back his ability to feel. She'd given him a reason to feel, a future worth building, and a love that transformed him from monster to man. And that, Adrian thought as he pulled his wife close and kissed her in front of their laughing children, was worth every risk, every danger, every impossible moment that had brought them together. They'd found each other in chaos. They'd built something beautiful from broken pieces. And they would spend the rest of their lives proving that love, real, complicated, fierce, and unshakable love, could survive anything, even the darkest parts of themselves. The end.